I've been sort of like saying that I want to rewrite the Nicole Kidman AMC ad. If you've seen that.
Which I love that ad. You know,
I love that ad. There's one huge flaw though, and she's saying all this in an empty movie theater.
Right.
Right? It's like that's not why you go to the movies, is to sit in an empty theater by yourself. I think we should treat the theatrical experience like live music, right? Like it's like you have ways to listen to music at your home, but you like to go see a band because it's nice to be amongst people.
How did you come to write this book?
What really struck me was that too few books were about my people. Where are our stories?
Would you give us the pleasure of reading an excerpt?
Yo, Sharonda, girl, you be pregnant again? If I is, Ray Ray is gonna be a real father this time around. Thank you.
Monk, your books are good, but they're not popular. Editors, they want a black book.
They have a black book. I'm black, and it's my book.
You know what I mean.
Welcome to Behind the Lens. Today, well, he's making his feature film directorial debut, but he has already won an Emmy, 2 Writers Guild Awards, Image Awards. You know all of these shows that he's worked on as a writer. Station 11, Watchmen, The Good Place, Master of None, Succession, on and on and on. What a resume already. And American Fiction he has written, produced, and directed. Welcome, Cord Jefferson.
Thank you so much.
All right.
It's a delight to be here.
What a resume you have. What a filmography,
Thanks,
or
thank
whatever
you.
they call it in the business.
Just
here.
an IMDb page. We can just say IMDb page. That's really what everybody's looking at.
Yeah, but now you've come out really with all guns blazing on in the feature film world here too, which isn't always easy to do, especially, you know, you're so established in television, and to make that, you've had a very interesting kind of trajectory in your career. Started like me, as a journalist.
Absolutely.
I just haven't gone to those next steps.
Yeah. Yeah, I sort of hadn't anticipated that I would end up here either. I just, the way that I got into TV was, I'd always been interested in writing for film and television, but I didn't really know anybody in the business, and so I didn't really understand how I would even get into that world. And so just by happenstance, one day I was very fortunate that a guy named Mike O'Malley, who's an actor and a writer, reached out to me and said that he'd read some of my journalism and asked if I wanted to come write for his TV show. He was starting a show called Survivor's Remorse, based loosely on LeBron James's life. And so he asked me to come to the writer's room for that in early 2014. So February 2014, I believe we started working on that. And then I just fell in love with it. I really enjoyed the process, and I decided to try to stay in TV and make my way there. And so it took me about 8 or 9 months until I got my second TV job. I almost quit and went back to journalism because I just wasn't getting hired anywhere. But I got hired for my second job, and then work has been pretty consistent from then.
You worked at the Gawker.
I did.
As a journalist.
I did.
Until it
2012
went
to 20.
under, right?
No. I left before it went under. I was there from 2012 to 2014.
Okay,
so
yeah.
it was a couple years before it died.
Yeah. And infamously, I saw your segment with Chris Hayes on MSNBC. I'm obsessed with MSNBC and Chris Hayes. I think he's great.
Yeah.
And he put you on, and that was such an interesting story. It was about all the white surfer culture really wreaking havoc in Huntington Beach. Huntington Beach is kind of a weird place in the middle of everything, all the beach towns. I live in a beach town. It is super conservative and odd. It's just the odd man out.
That's what that joke that we did, sort of like a satirical sketch on that show about sort of something that I'd written for Gawker, and that sketch actually is what ended up getting to Mike O'Malley. So that's Mike saw that MSNBC clip with Chris Hayes.
Wow.
And asked me to come work on the show based on that clip.
That's amazing.
Yeah. I almost didn't do it. I was tired. I felt tired, and I thought that I needed a haircut, and so I almost didn't go do it. And then I did it, and it changed my life. Yeah.
Well, you know, it's really an interesting thing. You could actually, I don't know if you've even thought about that, taking that whole aspect and trying to turn that into something.
Oh yeah, I mean, I think that I sort of see this this film as like a culmination of a lot of the stuff that I've done in my life so far, and I think that certainly satire has been something that has always fascinated me, and sort of, I think this movie is sort of, a big spiritual predecessor to this film is a movie called Hollywood Shuffle.
Yes.
And I saw Hollywood Shuffle, came out in '87, but I think I probably saw it a few years later.
Robert Townsend.
Robert Townsend and Keenan Ivory Wayans wrote it, and then Robert Townsend directed and starred
And
in it.
bankrolled it on his credit card.
Exactly,
Famously.
exactly.
That was a very famous little movie.
Yeah, and I love that movie, and it kind of exploded my head when I was a kid, because I sort of hadn't seen people discuss these serious issues of race and racism and identity in a way that sort of they were laughing the entire time and finding ways to find joy as they discussed these very serious issues. And it really, I don't think I knew what the word satire meant back then, but I certainly sort of understood the effect that the film had on me, and it kind of just exploded my brain. I don't know if I'd be here if I hadn't seen it.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
You seem to have, at your early career, writer. That's what you were doing. I didn't see any kind of, I'm going to direct an episode of a TV show or anything.
Yeah, no.
You never had that desire? Or?
I certainly had an interest, but the people are reluctant to give people an opportunity to direct something. I understand why. It's because there's a lot of money in these things, and sort of like trusting somebody to come in and direct something is it's a leap of faith. But I also I wasn't really putting myself out there to direct, because I sort of had I had a friend of mine who sort of suggested one day that I might want to direct, and I said, well, I haven't been to film school. I don't know anything about lenses or anything.
That's a plus.
Yeah. Yeah. And he said, I haven't been to film school. He said, I just spent a lot of time on set. I paid attention, and I know sort of what I want, and I'm able to articulate the vision that I had. And he said, you can learn stuff about lenses and cameras as you go along, but you don't absolutely need to know all of that stuff fundamentally to make a movie and direct a film. Like that stuff will come, and you just need to be able to articulate a vision and then surround yourself with really talented people who can help you execute that vision. So he sort of planted the seed around 2016, and then I thought, maybe I will try to direct something one day, but I never really put myself out there because I was waiting to find something that I felt I knew, like deep in my bones at the core. I think that because it made me feel comfortable, I knew that going in there I would feel out of my depth sometimes, and it's like I didn't know what was going on. But I felt that as long as I knew the story that I was trying to tell at the very sort of like core, like on a molecular level, if I understood that, then that was enough. You know what I mean? Like, it's like certainly I would need to learn on the job and sort of start to understand other stuff, but knowing sort of the story like the back of my hand made me feel comfortable enough to risk everything else and say, like, okay, maybe you don't know about lighting and maybe you don't know about lenses, but you understand the story you're trying to tell, and that will help guide every decision that you make. And so when I found this novel, when I found Erasure by Percival Everett, I loved it on such a, it resonated with me deeper than any piece of art had ever resonated with me, and I felt like I knew the story as well, if not better than anybody else on the planet. And so it just made sense to me finally to sort of stick my neck out a little bit and say, like, I think I'd like to try directing this.
It's such a smart story, first of all, and
Thanks.
everything. And it's interesting to me that you changed the title
Yeah.
of the book.
Yeah.
And that's sort of what this movie's about too. Well, maybe this book isn't as well. It's in the, a smaller section in the bookstore. My favorite scene in the movie is
Yeah.
where he just takes all his books and tries to move them to the front. It's
Yeah.
hilarious. But you change it to American fiction.
Yeah.
So you don't have the value of those who have read the book, immediately identifying, oh, I want to see that movie. Why did you make that decision?
To be honest, because we were worried that it might sort of get confused with Eraser, that Arnold Schwarzenegger movie, and also just because some people aren't familiar with the term erasure, and sort of like we wanted something, like we obviously want fans of the novel to sort of like come to see the film, but we were sort of like worried that, outside of that segment of the population, that other people sort of like might not be as interested. And so it took a long, long time to come up with the title American Fiction. We came very close to sort of locking the movie before we had the final title. And so, and I think that, this allows us, I think that sort of like the title American Fiction has it allows in sort of like a new audience of people who might not know what erasure is and sort of like might not come to it with the knowledge of the novel. It's sort of like, and I think that, I think that the fans of Percival Everett tend to be pretty rabid, and so hopefully they're going to find their way to the movie no matter what.
Did he find his way to the movie? What does he think?
Oh yeah, Percival was one of the first people I showed the cut to, and it was he came over with his wife, who's another brilliant novelist named Danzy Senna, and that was by far the most terrifying screening that I've had of the film so far. He said he watched the whole thing and he was very, very, afterward he was very, very thoughtful about it and told me he loved it and explained why. And one of the main reasons he said was because he said, it's very clear that you used my book as a launch pad, but he said that ultimately you've made something that feels entirely your own. It's sort of like a piece of art that stands unto itself and sort of like doesn't need the sort of like strength of the book to support it. And he said it wasn't a carbon copy. It's like you did something of your own. And he said you should be proud of that. And I really, that meant the world to me to hear him say that.
Yeah, it definitely feels like an original screenplay to me. I did not even know. When I first saw it, I go, okay, and I didn't really know it was based on the book. So, and it stands on its own.
Thank you.
Without question. You are blessed with an incredible cast here.
Oh yeah.
Led by Jeffrey Wright. Was he easy to convince to come on board, or was this a?
Well, I mean, it took there was like a little bit of a dance between us. There was a sort of like
first-time director.
Yeah, of course. So we sort of, I think it took about 3 or 4 months from our first meeting to him like officially signing on. But he was, I honestly didn't have, there was no plan B for who I was going to ask. I wanted Jeffrey Wright so early that I started reading the novel in his voice. I started thinking, like as I was reading the novel through the first time, I started picturing Jeffrey Wright in the scenes as I was reading it. So he was sort of like my number one person. He's the first person that I went to when the script was done. And so, yeah, we had a, as you said, like I'm a first-time director. I'd never written a movie before. I think that he was just really trying to, he asked me a lot of probing questions and sort of like, what's the tone? What other actors are you thinking about? What is sort of like the motivation for this scene? He was just sort of stress testing it, in a way that I really respected. He sort of like didn't want to dive in immediately, but he was interested. He was intrigued by the material. He went and read the novel and sort of said that after our first meeting, he said, okay, I want to go read the script again and read the book. And so, yeah, I think that he was doing his due diligence because I think that, I think that I understand his wariness and that, Jeffrey Wright's in Batman and he's in 007 and he's on Speed Dial for Wes Anderson. Yeah, and he's in Westworld. He's literally in the biggest movies in the world. And so I can see why he wanted to stress test this because he's like, am I going to do this or am I going to go to a massive movie with the sort of like director who's done 15 films and they all cost $150 million. But I feel I will be forever indebted to him because he didn't have to do this movie, He certainly could have made more money doing something else and certainly, could have had a nicer trailer or whatever working for somebody else. Like he really took a risk and sort of like it was a leap of faith for him to come aboard this movie. And when he did, it really legitimized the entire project all of a sudden. It's like the financiers were willing to come up with more money all of a sudden. Other actors were eager to sort of work on the project because they're like, oh my God, I get to work with Jeffrey Wright. And so him signing on really got the movie on its feet in a real way, and I will be forever indebted to him for that.
And I think he should be forever indebted to you because I don't think he's had a leading role like this since Basquiat or
something. Yeah, in like 30 years.
In his career, he's always part of ensembles and things, but this gave him an opportunity for a killer leading role at this point.
Yeah, I think that I think that for me I hadn't even thought about that until I was finished watching the first cut of the movie, and I realized, like, my God, I loved his performance so much, and I was so excited about it. And sort of in thinking about that, I realized that I hadn't seen him as a lead in a film since Basquiat, and I thought, what a shame that is, because he is. When you talk to people who know about this stuff, when you talk to people who know about theater and film and television and acting and who are interested in these kinds of things, you know, to a person, generally they'll say that Jeffrey Wright is one of our greatest living actors. He's one of the greatest actors in the world. And the fact that it's taken 30 years, you know, for me to see him in another leading role is a little crazy. You know, it's a little. He is, you know, I'm very, very happy that he is front and center in this film, and I'm very, very happy that, you know, I'm happy the strike's over for any number of reasons, but my own selfish reason is because I'm really happy that Jeffrey can stand front and center and receive the acclaim that he's getting, because he deserves it.
Exactly, and he is getting a lot of acclaim. And this movie too, one at, you know, we all go to the Toronto Film Festival and wait to see what's going to win the People's Choice Audience Award, because it's a, whatever you want to call it, it's a good luck charm. It's just uncannily accurate of movies that will go on all through awards, all the way to the Oscars and things. They just have a track record. This movie won it this year after all those things. Were you shocked, surprised,
shocked,
pleased?
Absolutely shocked. Yeah, I was all three of those things. I was shocked, surprised, and pleased. I think that for me, you know, this was a year, people were telling me to like temper my expectations, because this is a year, you know, that it was a very competitive year. For whatever reason, like every single huge director in the world decided to make a movie. So it's like, so they were like, you know, don't be surprised if it doesn't get in, because it's going to be competitive. And so when I found out that we'd just gotten into the festival, I was literally jumping up and down in my kitchen with joy, because I wasn't even confident that was going to happen. I didn't even allow myself to think about winning the audience award. It just was, there was just sort of no way that I could dream that big right now. It just felt like we got in. That to me was a victory enough. And so the fact that the movie has the momentum it has, the fact that we won that award, it just, that award also was special, because it was, you know, it's just people who came to watch the movies, you know, it was just people who came to see the films, and that felt really nice, that it's just, you know, the audience who was really coming out to enjoy things and enjoy the theatrical experience. That was a special prize for me, absolutely.
Yeah, for sure. It's such a smart satire. Thanks. You know, when you see satire done well on the screen, you know, Billy Wilder, all these great directors that did it so well, you almost forget, wow, you know, that looks easy. Yeah. And it's so, the hardest thing to pull off is something like that, and get the tone right and make it human, as this movie does all of those things.
Thanks, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was I always said that I wanted to make something satirical that was never farcical. And so sort of a lot of satire, I think, either intentionally or unintentionally, starts to bubble over into farce. And I think that that's something that I was always trying to avoid. I didn't want it to become slapsticky or silly. And so, you know, I tried to find it on the page when I was first writing the script, and then, you know, on set sometimes, if I felt like something was getting a little too silly and big and broad, I would sort of try to rein it in. But then on the other hand, if I thought something was getting a little too morose and dark, I also tried to temper that and sort of like bring it back toward the middle. And then, you know, when I wasn't able to execute that on set, we really found the tone officially in the edit. Like that was sort of like really where we were able to sand down the edges and really find the tightrope that we were trying to walk. And that's, you know, that to me is one of the, I really just wanted the movie to feel like life, which is neither comedy nor tragedy. You know, life is sometimes comedy and tragedy in the same day or the same hour. And so that's the road that I was trying to walk, was just sort of like something that felt like life, that felt like how sort of people feel, and sort of like the ups and downs, the sort of instantaneous ups and downs sometimes. So I think that if, you know, I very much feel like I threaded the needle that I was trying to thread, and I hope other people agree.
Oh yeah, I mean the scene with Issa Rae sitting there being interviewed is so perfect, because you don't go over the top. You play it so much on his face watching this. Yeah. With a largely white audience there jumping up and applauding when she, you know, she's plugging her book, We Who Live in the Ghetto. Yeah. Yeah. It's funny even talking about it. You know? Yeah. But the way it's played is so perfect, because it never sails over the top like it could have.
Thanks. Yeah, and I think that one of that is credit to the actors. I think particularly all the actors were sort of really great and came in really grounded from day one. Yeah. And I think particularly Jeffrey Jeffrey does this amazing thing in the film where it's just, just his facial expressions, just like his face acting when he's not saying anything. But I think particularly in that scene that you're discussing where it's just like Jeffrey doesn't have a line in that scene, but he kind of steals the scenes at times, right? Just because like what he's doing with his face and his eyebrows is so wonderful and understated. And I think that, I think that sometimes dramatic actors feel like they need to be very big to be funny. They sort of like need to change their subtlety in order to be humorous. That sort of like funny means big and broad. And Jeffrey never had that. He never had sort of like the sort of, well, I need to be kind of silly in order to be funny. He sort of knew and trusted in his abilities and trusted in the material that sort of it would be funny without him sort of like being hammy. And I really appreciated that about his performance.
Yeah. I'm curious what you learned from doing television, from working on shows like Succession and like with Damon Lindelof and all of these top creative people who also venture into movies as well.
Yeah.
Were you watching them all the time, or what did you take from that?
The thing that I really took from television that I think was important to the film is, one of the reasons I think people like television and one of the reasons why I like writing it and watching it is because television, because of the time, gives you an opportunity to be digressive and parenthetical and sort of like go into strange character studies that you might not have time to do if you're in a film. It's just sort of like because you have 10 hours or 20 hours or however long, it allows you to sort of like get complex and deep on human beings. And that is sort of a lesson that I wanted to take with me when it came to the film. I didn't want to have characters who were just flat and sort of were there to push the plot forward and sort of like that's all they did. There's a couple of character moments that early on in sort of like the script stage, people were trying to convince me to like cut the characters, because it's like, well, you don't need this character. It sort of like isn't moving things forward, and it's kind of like a tangent to sort of like follow that journey. And I just felt like I always sort of like pushed back against that and ultimately said no to a lot of it because, I wanted to feel like lived in. I wanted these people to feel lived in. I wanted their lives to feel whole, the way that all of our lives feel whole and complex and difficult at times. And it just felt like, to me, that was the heart and soul of the story in many ways, and I think that that's what helped it from collapsing under the weight of the satire, right? And collapsing under the weight of the comedy is that if you're coming from a scene where sort of like you're funny and it's this big comedic beat, generally the scene following that is going to sort of like be more grounded and sort of like going to bring things back to earth in a way that felt right, so that the movie never became just, like I said, silly or slapsticky.
Which is why I think people really relate to it. And also, I don't know if this was in your head, but as it's coming out, critical race theory, all of the school book banning threats, and what's going on with all of this in this country and elsewhere now makes this even more timely on that level.
Thanks. Yeah. I mean, I think that I've never seen us more polarized in my entire life, not even just as a country, as a world. And I think that for me, one of the reasons that we've become so polarized is kind of we've all retreated into our separate corners to sort of like, we no longer even watch the same news. We no longer agree on the same facts. We don't, this corner reads their newspaper and this corner reads their newspaper and this corner reads their newspaper, and it's kind of never the twain shall meet, right? And so I wanted to make something that felt big tent, that felt inviting, that felt sort of like, I don't care what your politics are, I don't care what race you are, I don't care how old you are. Hopefully there's something for everybody to come in and sort of enjoy and sort of like relate to. And I think that for me, having something that felt like there was, sometimes it's sort of like a spoonful of sugar helps the medicine go down.
Right.
And so hopefully it comes in and I had a woman come up to me in New York recently, and she's not the only one, but I had a white woman come up to me in New York and she said, that was a very difficult watch for me. That really sort of was painful at times, but she said, but I really leaned into it and I enjoyed it. And sort of I think that, I do think that on the opposite side of discomfort a lot of the time is knowledge or wisdom or whatever you want to call it. And so I think that Yeah, that to me has sort of been nice to hear, is that people can come in, and even if they're feeling a little uncomfortable, it doesn't feel mean-spirited, and it doesn't feel like you're lecturing anybody, and it doesn't feel like you're scolding people. It just feels like, let's come in and laugh about this stuff and then talk about it afterward. And sort of, I think right now people are feeling very, very tense about everything and sort of like afraid to offend people. Like, I've had people say, you know, I didn't know if I'm supposed to laugh in the movie. And it's like, yeah, of course. I wrote a bunch of jokes in there. You're supposed to laugh. Like that, you're supposed to laugh. There are jokes in the movie in order for you to laugh. And so I just am hoping to, you know, people ask me what I was trying to accomplish with the film. And really, what I was trying to accomplish with the film was just sort of putting forward a series of characters and situations and scenes, and then letting people make their own decisions, and sort of like, if they can laugh along the way and enjoy themselves as they make those decisions, all the better for it.
Which is great, as you touched on, but being at the Toronto Film Festival, seeing this in a theater, I think is so important.
Oh, absolutely.
First of all, it's very important for comedy and you know, in a communal way, but this one should be seen in theaters. There's no question in my mind.
I agree.
I'm glad they're doing it that way.
Yeah, me too. I agree. I think that this movie especially is, I think, one that's nice to be on the ride with other people on, because not everybody's going to be laughing at the things you're laughing at. Not everybody's going to be gasping at the things you're gasping at. And then when you leave, I hope that it's the kind of film, you know, my favorite kinds of movies are ones that I walk out of the theater and I just turn to whomever I was there with and just say, do you want to go get a meal and talk about what you just saw? Because I can't stop thinking about it, you know? And I think that is what I'm hoping the film accomplishes, is it gets people thinking a little bit and sort of like wanting to go and discuss it with their friends and start a conversation. That to me would be the biggest reward.
Can't ask for more.
No.
Thanks, Cord.
Thank
Thanks
you.
for joining us on Behind the Lens.
I've
and
had such a pleasure.
best of luck with the film, as it does go into theaters everywhere. And
Thank
we'll
you
see
so
what
much.
people say. It'll be exciting.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, man.
Thank you.